as a firm, we're running close to a 90% success rate getting the lender to waive deficiency. Now, that's a statistic, and a statistic is hindsight. That's essentially through today. So many things could happen one way or the other to improve that statistic or to blow it out of the water, because it's a process that involves people, judges. Some judges have different opinions. Some judges are very pro-lender, and other judges are pro-borrower. There's a judge in Pinellas County. If you bring a motion written on a napkin and you put it in front of the judge, whatever it is, as long as there's a lender on the other side of the table, you're going to win. That's just part of it. I would say my statistic is primarily from the range of clients that I have that have hired me to defend a foreclosure suit. A certain number of them, midway through the foreclosure suit, do a short sale.
Sell short, okay.
Right, and that's included in my statistics. Because it's almost a no-brainer to defend a foreclosure suit in most cases, because at least you have an attorney that could put forward a number of defenses. If it's their primary residence, they get to stay there essentially for very little cost. If it's an investment with the goal of avoiding a deficiency, you then have an attorney that can be with you through that process. Like if for some reason, let's say you're served with a foreclosure suit, I'll explain it this way. You're served with a foreclosure suit and you get the summons, it's 20 days, you don't respond within the 20 days. Probably if it's a foreclosure mill, 60 days later, the lender will say, gee, they didn't respond, enter a default. Once that default is entered, as long as service was proper, you've lost your opportunity to challenge that lawsuit. You're at the sole whim and discretion of the lender. The lender can proceed at will, it can drag its feet, it can do whatever it wants, and technically it doesn't even have to notify you of the process going forward. However, if you lawyered up, you're going to be aware of the process, you'll probably get a better outcome, and even if the lawyer would be unsuccessful, even if the lender would get through all the hurdles that are set up and follow the law, making the lender do the right thing, if some judge slams down the gavel and says, summary judgment to the lender, I don't care about your outstanding discovery, if a judge does that, having an attorney during that period, it should, if the lender does come back into court to pursue a deficiency, and they have to do that, and I'll take a second to explain a deficiency and how that's arrived at. Once that judge slams down the gavel on a summary judgment, that judge is basically saying you owe $200,019 to the penny, and if you don't pay that $200,019 in the next 30 days, your house will be auctioned off 45 days from now on the courthouse steps. That $200,019 is established when that judge throws down the gavel. So that sets the top line for a deficiency right there. Now, at that point, you've lost your opportunity to bring forward all the defenses that I would argue should reduce the principal balance. Most of my defenses go towards, hey lender, you didn't follow your own guidelines, you overvalued the property, you did a bunch of stupid stuff that should reduce the principal balance towards today's market value. That's kind of my strategy. But by having a lawyer, even if the lender gets a summary judgment, the lender has to go back into court sometime later and say, look, judge, you determined previously $200,019. We sold the property at the courthouse steps, or we bought it back at the foreclosure sale and listed it with a broker and sold it a year later. We put $100,000 in our pocket, give us a deficiency judgment for $100,019. And that's how the lender would establish. Now, at that hearing where they would actually, the lender's attorney would be asking for that, you would still have the opportunity to bring an appraiser in and say, look, you sold it for a lot less than what it was worth. It was really worth X, Y, Z. And in theory, the value of it is the value on the sale date itself. And so you could argue, even if the lender sold it for $100,000, a year later, you could argue it was worth $150 on the sale date itself, but you have to bring an expert to court in with you. I think a lot of the reason you don't see a lot of lenders pursuing deficiencies is because they have to go through that extra step to establish it. And if you had a lawyer during that process, they'd have to put your lawyer on notice, hey, this hearing's coming up. If you default, you're just out of the case entirely, you're done. You've lost all your opportunities to dispute. And the cost-wise, it's almost a no-brainer too to lawyer up if you get served with a foreclosure suit. And what's funny is, to me, it's funny, a foreclosure suit is probably the biggest lawsuit the average person would get involved in for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But on a historical percentage basis, less than 5% of foreclosure suits are ever defended, historically. Now that number is more like 15%, but it's still ridiculously low. But I think people mentally, once they get to that point, and I've seen it a lot, they're kind of just throwing up their hands and saying, well, and they don't go, they don't even look on the internet, they don't try to find an attorney, they don't talk to anybody, they just bury their heads in the sand.